My stepdad texted me 5 days before Christmas. "Don't bother coming. This family has moved on without you." I stared at the screen, and instead of heartbreak, I felt relief. I typed one word back, "Fine." Then I shut off my phone. But 5 days later, I woke up to 10 missed calls, relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years, and one number I didn't recognize. A lawyer's voice filled my voicemail. "Ms. Mitchell, you are legally required to attend the reading of your mother's will." That's when I realized no one ever told me she was dead. It wasn't always texts that cut like knives. Growing up, the rejection came slower, quieter, like drops of cold water that eventually soaked through your skin until you stopped noticing the chill. My earliest memory of Robert wasn't him yelling or being cruel. It was him smiling at James, his son, the way fathers are supposed to smile at their children. That smile never reached me. For me, it was lectures about gratitude, lectures about not being a burden. I was 8 years old when Mom married him, still clutching the memory of my real father, who had died in a construction accident. I remember the smell of sawdust that clung to Dad's jacket, the roughness of his calloused hands when he tucked me into bed. He was gone, and Robert filled the space, but not for me. For Mom, yes. For James, always. For me, there was only the constant reminder, you're lucky to be here at all. By the time I was a teenager, I knew my role. James was the golden child, the one who got a BMW for his 16th birthday. I got a used bike from a garage sale, its paint chipped, and the brakes squealing with every stop. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. I was tough. I could handle second best. But at night, when I'd hear James and Robert laughing in the garage about car engines or sports games, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering why laughter never included me. Mom tried to balance the scales in her own quiet ways. She'd slip an extra cookie into my lunchbox or leave notes on my pillow. "You're stronger than they'll ever understand." At the time, I thought she meant school bullies or my awkwardness or maybe just being the stepchild. But later, when I was deployed halfway across the world, I'd realize she'd been preparing me for something far heavier. School was another battlefield. Teachers who came to our house for conferences would shake Robert's hand, congratulate him on James's potential, then glance at me as if I was invisible. James had charm. I had discipline. He could talk his way out of missed assignments. I stayed up until midnight making sure mine were perfect. Yet at the dinner table, James's report cards were celebrated with ice cream runs, while mine were brushed aside with, "That's what you're supposed to do, Sarah." One memory still cuts sharper than any bullet I ever dodged overseas. I was 17, sitting at the kitchen table filling out scholarship applications, my hand cramping from writing essay after essay. Robert walked in, saw the stack of papers, and smirked. "Don't waste your time. A girl doesn't need fancy degrees. You'll just end up married and your husband will take care of you." I remember Mom snapping at him that night, telling him to stop underestimating me, but his words lodged deep in my chest. I carried them with me even as I packed my bags for basic training, even as I signed enlistment papers. The military wasn't just escape, it was salvation. For the first time, I was judged by effort, not blood. Every drop of sweat on the training field erased a little more of Robert's voice in my head. Every promotion proved I could stand on my own. I sent photos home in uniform, beaming with pride, hoping maybe they'd hang them on the fridge next to James's latest car or vacation. Instead, silence. The fridge stayed full of James's smiling face, none of mine. When Mom hugged me goodbye at the airport before my deployment, she pressed her cheek against mine and whispered, "You're stronger than all of them combined." I thought she meant surviving war zones, facing down enemies in desert heat, learning to sleep under mortar fire. But now looking back, I think she knew the real battlefield was this family, the whispered lies, the withheld truths. The way Robert could twist a narrative until even a room full of relatives believed his version over mine. What hurts most isn't the favoritism or even the erasure. It's the time. Birthdays missed. Holidays where my calls never made it through. The way I'd send packages, scarves from Afghanistan markets, a necklace I found in Kuwait and never hear back. I used to wonder if Mom had stopped caring. Now I know the truth. She was never given the chance to respond. Robert stood as gatekeeper, filtering out my love like junk mail. In Afghanistan, nights stretched endless. The desert wind carried sand into everything: your clothes, your boots, even your teeth. But worse was the silence when I sat in the dim light of the barracks writing emails to Mom, pouring out my heart and hearing nothing in return. I convinced myself she was busy or too tired, that she didn't know how to use her email anymore. I wanted to believe anything except the possibility that she'd stopped waiting for me. But then came Carol's message, Mom's old friend from church. She found me through military contacts months after Mom's funeral, and her words still haunt me. She asked about you every day, Sarah. She wanted you there. 2 months in hospice, and I could have been granted emergency leave. I could have held her hand one last time. But I never got the chance. Robert made sure of that. And yet through all of it, there were moments that kept me tethered. The sound of Mom's voice in my memory, the feel of her hand on my cheek, the smell of her favorite lavender lotion when she hugged me goodbye. Those tiny fragments reminded me I wasn't crazy. That love had been real even if Robert tried to rewrite it. So when Martha Reeves looked at me across that polished conference table and said Sarah Mitchell is specifically named in the will, I felt something shift inside me. For once, the lies couldn't erase me. For once, my mother's voice, silent for 3 years, was about to speak louder than Robert ever could. The air in Martha Reeves's office felt like it had weight. Every breath I took tasted of polished wood, faint coffee, and the unspoken hostility radiating from Robert's side of the table. James leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirk plastered on his face as if he already knew the outcome. The relatives crowded along the edges, whispered in clusters, their eyes darting toward me with thinly veiled judgment. Some had pity in their gazes, others suspicion, but none of them offered the thing I needed, most acknowledgement. Robert shifted in his suit, tugging at the cufflinks that glinted under the fluorescent lights. "Martha," he began, his voice syrupy but sharp. "Underneath this really is a waste of everyone's time. Sarah isn't family anymore. She left, remember? She made her choice when she ran off to the military." The words hit harder than a sandstorm in my lungs. I'd heard versions of that line my whole life, but here in front of 20 people with Mom's memory hanging over the room, it cut deeper than ever. "She's not even blood," James added, echoing his father like a faithful echo. He leaned forward, eyes locked on me, savoring the moment. "She's just someone Mom pitied." My hands curled into fists beneath the table nails, biting crescents into my skin. Part of me wanted to scream, to fling every email, every unanswered package, every ignored phone call into their faces. But another part, the soldier part, knew silence could be louder than rage. Let them talk, I told myself. Let them reveal who they really are. Then Robert twisted the knife. He spoke of Mom's last days with a performance worthy of an award. Every night he said, his voice cracking. Linda set a place at the table for Sarah. She kept asking when her daughter would call. And do you know what I had to do? I had to lie. I had to protect her from the truth that Sarah had abandoned her. The lie was so bold it made my vision swim. I gripped the edge of my chair to keep from standing. Images flooded my mind, Christmas calls that Robert claimed Mom was too tired to take the bouquet I'd ordered for Mother's Day that never got a thank you. The packages that came back unopened with return to sender scrawled across the label. Every unanswered message, every ignored attempt at love, Robert had weaponized them, turned absence into abandonment. The whispers in the room grew louder. An aunt muttered that she'd suspected as much. A cousin shook her head, eyes full of disappointment. Their faces blurred, morphing into one collective judgment. You failed her. You weren't there. My pulse pounded in my ears. For a moment, I believed them. Maybe I was the absent daughter, the one who loved her duty more than her mother. Maybe I deserved their contempt. But then, like a light cutting through fog, I remembered Mom's voice at the airport. You're stronger than all of them combined. The strength wasn't about carrying rifles or marching 20 miles with a pack. It was about this sitting in a room full of people who wanted me erased and refusing to vanish. Martha's calm voice sliced through the noise. Sarah Mitchell is named explicitly in the will. She has every legal right to be here. That single phrase steadied me. Legal right. My mother's will. The one thing Robert couldn't twist with his words or erase with silence. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of power stir inside me. Robert laughed bitterly. She didn't even come to the funeral. 3 years gone, and she waltzes in now, expecting what money recognition she chose strangers in uniform over her own mother. That's who you're defending. Gasps followed his words. More nods. The narrative was set like wet cement hardening around me. I could almost feel it, every glance, every murmur, the weight of their condemnation, pressing me into the role of the ungrateful daughter. That's when the breaking point came, not as an explosion, but as a stillness, a decision. I stopped waiting for their approval. I stopped hoping for understanding. In that moment, I knew I'd never convince them with explanations or tears. They were too invested in the story Robert had built, too eager to keep me in the role of the outcast. And if they wanted me to be the villain in their play, then fine. I would play it quietly, strategically, but on my own terms. I glanced across the table, meeting Robert's eyes. His smug certainty faltered for just a heartbeat. Maybe he saw something in my stare he hadn't expected, not the girl he'd dismissed, but the woman who had endured deployments, firefights, and loss. The soldier who knew how to wait, how to plan, how to strike without warning. Inside, a resolve crystallized. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't storm out. I would sit here silent and steady until Martha opened that envelope. And whatever Mom had written, whatever truth she had left for me, would do the speaking Robert could never silence. It was the moment I stopped being the scapegoat and became something else entirely. Not the abandoned daughter, not the outsider, but the rightful heir to my mother's voice, her love, her legacy. The breaking point wasn't about walking away. It was about planting my feet so firmly that nothing, not Robert's lies, not James's sneers, not the whispers of disappointed relatives, could move me again. So I straightened in my chair, folded my hands on the table, and said nothing. My silence was louder than their accusations. And when Martha reached for that sealed envelope, I was ready. Martha placed the sealed envelope gently on the table like it was an unexploded grenade. Everyone leaned forward, their breath hitching in unison. Robert adjusted his tie again, a nervous tick that betrayed his slipping confidence. James's smirk wavered, but he held onto it like a mask. Before we proceed, Martha said, her voice calm but carrying an edge that made the room still. I want it understood that this document is legally binding. It was witnessed by 2 physicians and notarized by hospice staff. Any attempt to contest it will be met with immediate legal action. Robert scoffed, trying to regain his swagger. The original will was simple, everything to the surviving spouse. Linda and I discussed it years ago. There is a codicil, Martha interrupted, sliding her glasses higher on her nose. Added 2 weeks before Linda's passing. The room erupted. Whispers turned into exclamations, cousins murmuring, aunts gasping. James shot to his feet, his voice sharp and desperate. That's impossible. Mom wasn't in her right mind at the end. The medications, the cancer, she was confused. On the contrary, Martha replied, unfazed. I have affidavits from her doctors confirming her mental capacity on the date the codicil was executed. Linda was clear, lucid, and determined. I watched Robert's face drain of color. His jaw clenched, the vein in his temple pulsing. He hadn't expected this. For 3 years, he'd lived off Mom's house, her savings, her insurance money. James's Instagram feed had been a highlight reel of their spending, luxury vacations, new cars, designer clothes, all funded by what Mom left behind. They thought the game was over, that the inheritance was theirs. But Mom had planned otherwise. Martha opened the envelope and pulled out 3 items, the updated will, a handwritten letter, and a document sealed in a plastic sleeve like evidence. She arranged them, carefully deliberate movements designed to heighten the gravity of the moment. Linda visited me privately 3 weeks before she passed, Martha said. She came without Robert's knowledge. She insisted on recording her wishes in writing and... She paused, holding up an iPad in video. Robert surged to his feet. That's outrageous. She was frail, weak. You manipulated her. She insisted, Martha said firmly, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. She wanted no ambiguity. My heart pounded. The idea of seeing Mom again, even on a screen, made my throat tighten. For so long, I'd imagined her last days in fragments pieced together from scraps of gossip and silence. Now the truth was about to surface. Robert's sister leaned forward, confusion on her face. Robert, you told us Linda didn't want to change anything. You said the will was finalized years ago. She did, Robert snapped. We agreed. No, Aunt Patricia spoke up quietly. I drove her to Martha's office myself that day. She said she had things to settle. The room shifted. Heads turned, whispers grew. Robert's fortress of lies was cracking, and he knew it. Martha opened a folder and laid out a series of printed emails. Linda brought these with her, emails from Sarah unanswered, deleted from her inbox but recovered from the server logs. Gasps filled the air. My chest clenched as I recognized subject lines I'd written, Happy Birthday, Mom. Safe in Kabul thinking of you. Please tell me you're okay. She told me, Martha continued, that Robert had been intercepting her emails, that he was responding to relatives from her account claiming Sarah had abandoned her. Robert's composure slipped. His lips tightened. His hands gripped the edge of the table. She could barely type. I was helping her. Then explain these, Martha said, pulling out another stack. Emails from Linda's account to family members. Your wording, Robert. Your phrasing. She recognized it wasn't her voice. Uncle Pete, Mom's brother, shot to his feet. You told us Sarah didn't want to visit, that she'd cut Linda off. You lied to us. Robert's face flushed. I was protecting her. Seeing Sarah would have upset her. Or Martha said smoothly it would have interfered with certain financial decisions you were making. She slid the plastic-sleeved document across the table. A $200,000 loan application filed 2 days after Linda entered hospice, using the house as collateral. 2 signatures required, one of them forged. The room went silent. You could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights. James's smirk vanished completely. That's a lie, Robert said, but his voice was thin now. Linda signed it herself. Did she? Martha asked. Or did someone sign for her? Linda anticipated you'd say that. She left me a handwriting sample for forensic comparison. The blow landed. Robert stumbled back into his chair, pale as chalk. I sat there, heart steady, breathing slow. I hadn't raised my voice once. I hadn't defended myself against their accusations. I didn't need to. Mom had done it for me. Every deleted email she saved, every forged document she exposed, every video she insisted on recording it was all part of her plan. For years, Robert silenced me. Now Mom's evidence was silencing him. James tried to salvage their narrative. This is ridiculous. Even if that's true, Mom still would have wanted us to have the house. Sarah hasn't been here in years. She doesn't belong. Martha lifted the handwritten letter. Linda addressed that as well. She wrote this for Sarah and for all of you. Robert lunged forward. Don't you dare sit down, Martha said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, and Robert obeyed. I realized then that the real counterattack wasn't my silence or even Martha's documents. It was Mom's foresight. She knew Robert would twist the truth. She knew I'd be painted as the absent daughter. So she left behind a trail of evidence, a voice that could rise from the grave to shatter every lie. I didn't need to fight them head on. All I had to do was sit still and let the truth unfold. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. The room was no longer a dignified office. It had become a battlefield. Whispers turned into open arguments, cousins muttering accusations, uncles demanding answers, aunts shaking their heads in disbelief. Every pair of eyes flicked between Robert, sweating in his expensive suit, and me, the daughter who wasn't supposed to be there. Robert slammed his palm on the table, the crack echoing off the polished walls. This is character assassination, he thundered, his face-flushed veins standing out on his neck. Linda was confused. She was dying. How dare you drag her through the mud like this? She dragged herself here, Martha replied coolly, not flinching. She documented everything. I didn't put words in her mouth. She chose them. But Robert was in performance mode now, desperate to reframe the narrative. He stood tall, shoulders squared, and addressed the room like a preacher to his congregation. I was the one holding Linda's hand through chemo. I was the one at every doctor's appointment. Where was Sarah? Where was this so-called devoted daughter? 10,000 miles away playing soldier while her mother wasted away. Gasps rippled through the relatives. A few shook their heads at me, pity in their eyes. James seized the momentum, his voice sharp and smug. She wasn't here when Mom cried herself to sleep. She wasn't here when the doctors gave the prognosis. She didn't even show up for the funeral, and now she thinks she deserves the house. He gestured toward me with disdain. She's not family, she's a stranger. My chest burned, but I forced myself to stay still to breathe. In Afghanistan, I'd learned that the one who panics first usually loses. The same rule applied here. I could feel the tide of opinion shifting. Robert's lies had sunk deep over the years, and now his performance was watering them, trying to make them bloom into truth. But cracks were showing. Aunt Patricia's voice cut through the noise, firm and shaking with anger. Robert, you told me Sarah knew. You swore she just didn't care. I asked you, begged you if you'd told her Linda was dying. And every time you said yes. Robert turned toward her eyes, wide-cornered. I didn't want to upset her. She had her duty. Or you had your loan application, Martha said, sliding the plastic sleeve forward again. The room erupted. Accusations flew like arrows. You forged her signature? Uncle Pete shouted. You stole from your dying wife. Robert's mask cracked. I was taking care of Linda. Do you know how expensive treatment was? Expensive, Martha's voice sliced through his excuse. She documented your withdrawals for James's Mercedes, for your gambling debt, for that boat you purchased last summer. James flushed crimson. That's not true. It is, Aunt Patricia snapped. I saw the boat. We all did. The relatives turned their loyalties fracturing. Some glared at Robert and James. Others still eyed me with suspicion. The room had split, and every word Robert spoke pushed more people away. But he wasn't done. He leaned across the table, eyes locked on me, voice dripping with venom. You abandoned your mother. Admit it. You cared more about your uniform than about her. All those years away, what did you send her? Emails? A few flowers. Do you think that makes you a daughter? My nails dug into my palms under the table. For a heartbeat, his words almost sank in. But then I saw the evidence Martha had laid out, the recovered emails, the forged loan, the video waiting to play. And I realized something. Robert wasn't speaking to me. He was speaking to the room, desperate to hold on to the story that kept him safe. So I didn't answer him. My silence was deliberate, a refusal to fuel his fire. And in that silence, the shift happened. Robert Uncle Pete said, his voice low and dangerous. You lied to us. You lied to Sarah. And you lied to Linda. Robert's eyes darted, looking for allies. James stepped in, his voice rising to a sneer. What does Sarah even want? Money, is that it? The poor soldier girl wants a handout. He pulled out his wallet with a theatrical flourish and flung a wad of cash onto the table. The bills scattered across the polished wood like fallen leaves. Here, $5,000. Take it and get out. It's more than you deserve. The room froze. Even Robert looked startled. I stared at the crumpled bills, then at James. My voice when it came was calm. That's generous considering you've been living off Mom's life insurance for 3 years. Money that was meant for her care, not your vacations. James's face twisted, his composure breaking. You don't know what you're talking about. I do, I said quietly, because Mom did. The tension snapped like a bowstring. Relatives gasped, some leaning back, others leaning forward. Robert's hands trembled on the table. James shoved the money back into his wallet, his bravado crumbling. The power struggle wasn't about me anymore. It was about the truth pressing in on Robert and James, exposing them, cornering them. Their lies had propped them up for years, but under the weight of evidence, they were collapsing. And through it all, I sat silent, steady. Every soldier knows sometimes you don't win by charging. You win by holding the line until the enemy breaks themselves against it. Enough, Martha said at last, lifting the iPad. It's time we let Linda speak for herself. The room fell silent. Even Robert, pale and sweating, slumped back into his chair. James clenched his fists, jaw tight. I took a breath, bracing myself. I hadn't heard my mother's voice in 3 years. Now her words were about to cut through all the lies. And I was ready. Martha pressed play and the iPad screen lit up with my mother's face. My breath caught. She was thinner than I remembered, wrapped in the soft blue cardigan I'd sent her for her birthday. The one Robert had told me she never wore. Her hair was sparse, her skin pale, but her eyes were steady, clear, determined. My name is Linda Mitchell. She began, her voice stronger than her body looked. Today is November 15th, 2021. I am of sound mind and body, though I am dying. I'm recording this because I need my daughter Sarah to know the truth. The room froze. Robert half rose from his chair, hand outstretched. Turn it off, no, Martha said firmly, and her finger hovered over the volume. She wanted this played here, for everyone. On the screen, Mom's voice went on, unwavering. Robert hasn't told Sarah that I'm sick. He's intercepted her calls, her emails. He's been telling all of you that she abandoned me. That is a lie. Gasps filled the room. Aunt Patricia covered her mouth with her hands. Uncle Pete swore under his breath. Mom leaned closer to the camera. I need this on record. Sarah didn't abandon me. Robert made sure she couldn't reach me. He had his reasons, life insurance policies, bank accounts, a loan he signed in my name without my consent. I found the documents. I found the deleted emails. I know. Robert's face drained of color. She was on morphine, he snapped. She didn't know what she was saying, but the video didn't care about his protests. My mother's voice filled every corner of the room. To be clear, I am leaving 60% of my estate to my daughter, Sarah Mitchell. This includes the house at 450 Maple Drive, my parents' home, where she grew up. Robert and James will receive 40% combined, and only if they vacate the house within 30 days. If they contest this, well, their portion goes to the Veterans Foundation in Sarah's name. The conference room erupted. James leapt to his feet, his face purple. She wasn't even blood. She doesn't deserve a penny. Your mother disagreed, Martha said smoothly, her eyes never leaving the screen. The video continued. Mom's eyes were wet with tears now, but her voice sharpened like a blade. Robert, I know about the withdrawals from my retirement account. $43,000. I know about the car, the gambling, the boat. James, I know you've never held a steady job. The $20,000 I leave you is generous, but it is meant as a chance to start over. Don't waste it. James's jaw dropped. He looked like a child caught stealing candy, his anger dissolving into naked panic. Mom, he whispered to the screen as if she could still hear. And Sarah. Mom's tone softened. She smiled, then weak, but real. My brave girl, I am proud of you. You became the woman I always hoped you'd be. Strong, independent, honorable. This house is yours now. Come home when you're ready. Make it a place of love again, not the prison Robert turned it into. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to look away. Her voice was pulling me back through 3 years of silence, through every unanswered call, every returned letter. It was as if she'd reached across time to hand me the truth directly. She held up a photograph, then me in my Army uniform standing beside her at my basic training graduation. This is my daughter, she said firmly. This is my legacy. And Robert, if you're watching this, know that I forgave you many things, but keeping my daughter from me, that is unforgivable. The screen went black. For a moment, silence, not a breath. Not a shuffle, just the weight of Mom's words settling on every soul in that room. Then chaos. Relatives began speaking, at once their voices sharp and overlapping. She forged the loan. He lied about the emails. I can't believe you, Uncle Pete stood and jabbed a finger at Robert. You kept her from saying goodbye to her own daughter. You stole from her while she was dying. Robert lurched to his feet, his voice ragged. This is fraud. Sarah manipulated her. She poisoned her against me. She was in Afghanistan, Martha said coolly. Military records verify it. She had no contact with Linda during the hospice months. Robert, this is your doing, not hers. The relatives turned their eyes no longer on me, but on him, on the man who had built an empire of lies and watched it collapse in seconds. James tried one last time, his voice desperate. She doesn't belong. She's not blood. But Aunt Patricia cut him off, her voice trembling with fury. She was Linda's daughter. That's all that matters. And you knew it. You both knew it. I stood slowly, the legs of my chair scraping the floor. Every eye turned to me. My voice was calm, steady. I accept the terms of my mother's will. Robert lunged forward, his face red with fury. You can't do this. You can't take our home. I looked him in the eye, unflinching. It was never your home. It was my mother's, and now it's mine. James slammed his fist on the table. You'll regret this. No, I said quietly. I'll heal from this. And in that moment, I realized Mom had been right. I was stronger than all of them combined. The day Robert and James finally drove away, the street looked unfamiliar, like the neighborhood had exhaled for the first time in 3 years. Their rental truck turned the corner, the taillights blinking twice before disappearing, and the quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was full. I stood on the porch with Mom's chipped World's Best Mom mug in my hand and felt the house settle, wood creaking like shoulders dropping from a decades-long hunch. The porch smelled like rain on old leaves and furniture polish. Aunt Patricia had come earlier with a rag and a box of lemon oil, saying it was time to wake the place up. Inside, I started with Mom's room. Robert had painted it a gray that felt like a no, but under the dresser behind an armoire that took 2 cousins and a lot of grunting to move the original yellow winked at me from a sliver of wall. I pressed my palm to it and saw the version of us that color knew, sunlight pooling at the foot of the bed, a fan humming, Mom humming too. We rolled on the new paint together, Aunt Patricia and I, slow strokes, careful edges, a ritual more than a renovation. With every pass, the room lost its hospital hush and remembered its own heartbeat. The safety deposit box key burned a soft circle in my pocket until I finally went to the bank. The box didn't hold treasure so much as proof that love leaves evidence, a Ziploc bag of my letters, the corners worn soft from being read. Snapshots from my deployments, each labeled in Mom's handwriting. Kabul, she smiled here. Bagram wind in her hair, Kuwait sunburned but happy. There was a small ledger, too. Mom's neat columns logging every lost email she found in her deleted folder, dates and times like tally marks on a prison wall. On the last page, she'd written, I know you'll come home. If this is how I have to meet you at the door, so be it. I brought the ledger home and set it on the mantel beside her graduation photo of me, the one she showed the entire church, whether they asked or not. The house, which had been a crime scene of erasures, became an archive again. I opened drawers and found the past intact. Her recipe cards greased at the corners, a stack of Christmas place cards with my name written 3 times for 3 years, never used. I slipped one of them under my plate that first Sunday, just to make a point to the walls the seat is taken. Sunday dinner grew from an idea to a practice to a promise. The first week, it was 6 of us. By the third, 12. We set the table with mismatched chairs and the good china, and it turns out grief eats. 2 people stayed for hours ladling out stories as if they'd been simmering on the back burner the whole time. A high school friend I hadn't seen since prom brought sweet tea and an apology for believing Robert. A deacon from Mom's church carried in lasagna and left with my number for the veterans group. The air filled with the clatter of forks and the kind of laughter that doesn't ask permission. The hallway smelled like garlic bread and lavender, Mom's scent mingling with my own life until it felt less like a haunting and more like a duet. The Linda Mitchell Veterans Foundation started at the dining table with a notepad and a budget scribbled between gravy drips. Paperwork became a website became a waiting list became keys handed to a woman in a threadbare coat who cried into my shoulder and said I didn't know anyone remembered us. We partnered with a local nonprofit where a woman named Elena Marine Corps. 6 deployments on a first-name basis, with every bureaucratic maze, taught me the art of relentless kindness. She and I learned the house's rhythms together, where the floorboard in the hallway complained how long it took the oven to over-brown biscuits, which window magnified afternoon light into a blessing. The legal battles became background noise. Martha filed motions with the same calm she'd used to press play on the iPad. The bank's fraud unit called then federal investigators. Robert turned bluster into strategy into plea deals. James posted vague status updates about starting fresh, punctuated with lion emojis. I didn't block him. I just stopped reading. There's a difference between closing a door and bricking it up. I chose a door with a latch-firm, simple mine. Boundaries altered the house's shape in subtler ways, too. I removed the spare key from the fake rock by the steps and gave copies only to people who understood keys are not invitations, but responsibilities. I changed the Wi-Fi password to Her Voice Wins and laughed every time I typed it. I boxed up anything in the house that felt like apology, labeled it "not ours," and left the box in the garage to be picked up by the thrift store. When in doubt, I asked, does this belong to love or to fear? If it belonged to fear, out it went. On the second month of Sunday dinners, I placed Mom's ring on the table, returned by Robert 2 days before he realized theft would void his inheritance, and watched the way it caught light. It wasn't a crown, it wasn't a trophy. It was a circle as simple and unbreakable as a promise. I threaded it onto a chain and wore it not as possession but as punctuation. The sentence of my life had stopped stuttering. Some mornings I visited Mom's grave with coffee and a notebook. The grass there never learned the difference between sunlight and mercy. It grew the same regardless. I read her the letters women sent to the foundation, stories of motel rooms and court dates, and second chances that smelled like fresh paint. I told her about Elena's laugh, how it made the ceiling feel taller. I told her about Aunt Patricia's brisk efficiency and Uncle Pete's stubborn tenderness, about the way the house forgave footprints as if it had been waiting to be walked in again. I told her the yellow room dried without streaks. I told her I slept through the night. In the quiet hours when grief shapeshifts into gratitude, I let myself reconsider the old tapes Robert had spliced together and left running in my head. You're not real family. You weren't there. You don't belong. The house itself disagreed. Every time I fixed a hinge or rehung a photo or planted the rosemary bush, Mom always meant to plant the walls, said in their wooden way, wrong. You belong so much the floor remembers your feet. The newspaper called once, wanting a quote for a feature local veteran exposes inheritance fraud. I told them the truth, that exposing something ugly is only half the work. The other half is building something honest in its place. They printed the line and strangers started leaving notes on the porch mat. For the foundation for Sunday dinner, for your mother's yellow room. I kept the notes in a bowl by the door so generosity had somewhere to live. There were hard days. Grief is a tide, not a calendar. Some afternoons I'd find myself standing in the hallway, hands braced on the door frame, unsure whether to cry or paint. On those days, I'd do both. Tears leave salt, paint leaves sheen. The wall kept both without comment. Boundaries didn't mean numbness. They meant I could feel without needing permission. A month before Robert's court date, Martha sat at my table with a stack of forms and her careful pen. You know, she said, not looking up, your mother planned every inch of this. She knew you'd carry it the rest of the way. I thought of Mom's ledger, the columns, the dates, the stubborn insistence on writing a path in numbers. That was her, I said. Lighthouses don't chase boats. They just stand and shine. Elena grinned at that when I told her, and by the next Sunday, she'd found a lighthouse cookie cutter for the dessert tray. The veterans snorted at the on-the-nose symbolism, but ate every last one. We framed a photo of the tray and hung it by the pantry, a small joke that became an emblem. When you've spent years navigating other people's storms, there's no shame in building a tower and lighting it on purpose. One evening, I opened the last letter from the safety deposit box. For Sarah's eyes, only in Mom's script. It wasn't instructions. It was permission. If you need to sell the house, someday sell it. If you need to leave the foundation to stronger hands, leave it. If you need to fall in love with something that takes you far away, go. Don't measure love by staying. Measure it by whether you are more yourself because of it. I folded the letter back along its creases and felt for the first time since the lawyer's voicemail a future that wasn't an apology. The house does small magic now. Doors don't stick. The porch light remembers to be warm. People who come hungry leave with leftovers and a phone number that actually answers. On quiet nights with the windows open and the hum of distant traffic soft as a lullaby, I swear I hear two sounds braided together: the buzz of a fluorescent light in a conference room, the moment a lie dies, and the low, steady music of a yellow room drying. Robert said I didn't belong. James said I wasn't family. But love kept the receipts, in ink and video and ring and room. It wrote my name in places they couldn't reach. It gave me a house and then asked the better question, what will you build here? So I built a table that keeps getting longer. I built a ledger where every line adds up to enough. I built a boundary that swings like a gate closed to harm open to grace. I built a life in my mother's echo until the echo wasn't repetition anymore, it was harmony. And when the past knocks, I answer without fear. The door frame is sturdy. The hinges don't squeal. The porch light is on. If you've ever been treated like an outsider in your own family, I hope my story reminds you that love leaves evidence and no one can erase it. Tell me in the comments, what boundaries have you had to set with your family? I read every single one. And if you want more stories about finding strength after betrayal, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. Sharing this helps others who feel erased know that they too belong.